Hi, I'm Derek Kilmer, State Senator for the 26th District, which goes from the Tacoma Narrows Bridge to downtown Bremerton. Although I no longer sit on the Senate Transportation Committee, I stay involved because transportation plays such a large role in our district. Whether you're riding a ferry or crossing the Narrows Bridge or just want to be able to count on safe and smooth travel to the grocery store. So today I'd like to touch on some key aspects of the transportation budget that the Senate proposed earlier this week. This is the first budget in history where we will have less revenue than the year before. Our transportation budget relies on gas tax, and between the high cost of gas and the move to more fuel-efficient automobiles, people just aren't buying as much gas. As a result, since the enactment of the 2010 supplemental transportation budget, the state is projected to lose $79 million in state revenues for the upcoming biennium. Over the 10-year time frame, the state loses nearly $821 million. At the same time the state's revenue is shrinking, its costs are increasing. For the upcoming biennium, it will cost an additional $152 million just to maintain existing transportation programs. Nevertheless, projects will move forward in this transportation budget. These projects support an average of 10,000 direct, indirect, and induced jobs each year over a 10-year period. The majority of the jobs are performed by the private sector, which is important right now when we're looking for contractors to be able to get back to work. This budget funds nearly $9 billion in transportation operating and construction activities. That said, there are some reductions in services and some new efficiencies in the transportation arena. Fundamental services will be hit hard, including the maintenance of our roads, the state patrol, and our state ferries. The proposed budget cuts nearly $28 million from the Department of Transportation and the Department of Licensing's administration. This is in addition to operating program savings and efficiencies of $27 million in the prior two-year period. This saves nearly 10% in operating costs. This budget is consistent with the Department of Transportation's projected reduction in the engineering and technical support workforce as highway construction programs wind down. The state will have 800 fewer full-time equivalents by the end of the 2013 to 2015 fiscal biennium. That's a broad overview of what's happening in the transportation budget. Let me give some information on issues specifically relevant for our neck of the woods. Ferries, of course, are particularly important to us here in the 26th District. Few communities, except perhaps for the San Juan Islands, rely on ferries as much as we do. This budget includes a $21.8 million reduction in the operating budget from the governor's announced savings through recent negotiated collective bargaining agreements. But we're not done looking for savings on that front. We also reduced the operating budget by $6.5 million in the administrative divisions of the state ferry system. But we're not done looking for savings there either. Through a Joint Transportation Commission study, we plan to look further at scaling management down to the labor force and finding ways for ferries management to more efficiently and effectively work with its labor force. There are also reductions in the ferry system's capital budget, eliminating projects that aren't absolutely vital to the long-range strategic plan. As it stands right now, the proposed budget also unfortunately includes some reductions in service levels. Several of us who represent ferry districts are pushing to reinstate that funding. As it currently stands, the budget proposes $4 million in service reduction. It's done by directing ferries to look at all routes and consider reducing shoulder seasons and targeting non-peak runs so that the least amount of riders are affected by these reductions. One area of the ferry budget where we get a bit hammered is on fuel. Like everyone else, rising fuel prices are adding to overall costs. This budget provides $134 million for vessel fuel costs. That's $81 million more than initially provided for the current biennium, an increase of 153%. That represents 27% of the ferry's operating budget. I've suggested adopting a fuel hedging strategy to reduce the downside risk to ferry system users. One other thing on the ferry front, this budget also plans to purchase a new 144-car capacity ferry vessel over the next two biennia. No one questions the need to have more new vessels. To have a functioning ferry system, we need boats that float. In my view, it's important to have the right boat for the right price. In the proposed budget, $65 million is provided up front for investment in a new ferry. The new ferry is also funded through a proposed 25-cent vessel replacement surcharge that's proposed in Senate Bill 5742. Ferries is directed to negotiate a contract with an option for a second vessel, which will be built if the needed revenues become available. contract must also require the vendor to provide options for reducing the cost of the vessel or the cost of maintaining and/or operating the vessel. One final quick comment on the ferry's budget. Earlier this year, the governor proposed substantial increases in ferry fares. This budget tries to mitigate those fare increases, assuming a 2.5% yearly fare increase and a fuel surcharge. I will keep fighting for greater efficiency in the ferry system and to ensure that our communities get the services they need at a price they can afford. The transportation budget also includes a small but important clause to protect the Narrows Bridge tolling account from being tapped to cover higher administrative costs. As someone who relies on the bridge, along with everyone else in the 26th District, I inserted this clause into the budget because I know firsthand how important it is to protect the interest of bridge users and toll payers. We've pursued a variety of reforms over the years to protect the best interests of Narrows Bridge toll payers. This is a continuation of those efforts. The need for the clause stems from the state's transition to a statewide tolling operations center in preparation for all electronic tolling on roads anywhere in the state. I want us to be prepared for all contingencies, including any unanticipated problems that could further affect the cost of tolling operations. To make sure Narrows Bridge users don't face any losses of revenue or any additional costs, I inserted a clause that states that the transition to all electronic tolling must have no adverse revenue or expenditure impact on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge tolling account. In other words, any additional tolling costs must be borne by other tolling systems, such as those that are set up for the 520 bridge, the Columbia River crossing, or any other road where tolls might be collected, not the Narrows Bridge tolling account. The state has told us several times that we will come out ahead with this new tolling system, and I remain optimistic that this will prove to be the case. But no matter what happens, including any unexpected problems like those we've seen recently with the transponder problems, I want to ensure that the absolute worst case scenario is that we wind up no worse than we were under the old system. One final thing on the transportation budget. There was also some important funding provided for the design of a new frontage road along Highway 16 over near the cemetery as you approach Gig Harbor North. My hope is that we can get that road built. It'll encourage economic development and improve safety for those who are traveling on Highway 16 and who want to see additional economic growth in the Gig Harbor area. So that's a broad overview of the Senate's transportation budget. I'll be back next week to talk about more things that are happening down here in Olympia. Again, I'm Kilmer, and I'm honored to represent you.